All right, gang, so we've gone a couple of different rounds now with trying to de-rust these tanks. This is the tank from the RT180 Yamaha dirt bike that is getting round 2. We're going to try a new product today. Before, we've been using muriatic acid and then neutralizing the muriatic acid with baking soda, but we're finding that we have to really line the tanks with something in order to keep them from rusting again. So today we're going to try, we got this kit. There's 3 pieces of it. There's a basically an acid. It looks like it's phosphoric acid. Looks like you mix it up with about 2.5 gallons of water, and then you let it sit for 24 hours. Part B, they call it. They make it simple. Part A, B, and C. Part B is the tank prep conditioner, which basically just eats up all of the water after you rinse this thing out. And then this is really the most important part of it. It's this cream. It's the actual tank liner. So this stuff will go in and in theory just coat the entire inside of this thing. This is the tank from the RT180 dirt bike. And we've been doing chip welded and or soldered and brazed. This particular tank had developed a series of pinholes. You can see the brass and the solder in different spots. We had to do it a second time because actually I let it sit for a year before I got around to doing it, and rust showed up inside the tank again. Yeah, this is after letting it sit for a year, so it's pretty bad again. So we're gonna try this the other way now. Instead of filling the tank up part way and sloshing it around with muriatic acid, we're actually gonna just fill the tank up all the way, let it sit, let it all neutralize, and then wash it out and line it. And we'll plug off the tube that goes to the carburetor here. So we got her full to the brim. You can see the liquid. So in theory, we got a little over 3 gallons, and it recommends 2.5 is all. But so we're probably a little bit on the light side as far as dilution, but we'll give it 24 hours and see what happens. I'm going to take all the acid out, wash it out. This is how I have to heat my water in here. Got to make sure we got some hot water. All right, so we just pulled all the acid solution out of the tank, and I will say that it's okay. It's a little, there's still rust in there. This is what we poured out of the tank. It's definitely a rust solution in there. I almost wish I could filter that out. Probably could before I put it back in the tank. I may have to either put this back in the tank because we didn't quite get all the rust out, or just dispose of it and use some muriatic acid. This isn't what I'm concerned about at the neck here, though there is still rust in the neck. This surface is good and clean. Looks really good. A little bit back there. The real concern I have is that stuff's going to continue to grow under the tank liner. But I'll have to look on the directions again, see if it says anything about it preventing rust from growing even if it's under the tank liner. So I did just read the instruction sheet that came in the box. Ironically, this thing goes into way more detail than what is on the labels on the bottles. I think I need to put the acid solution back in, let it sit again, at least a day. I'm gonna come back, check the motorcycle tank, see if the rest of the rust is gone from that solution, and we'll go through the exercise of doing that again. Hopefully this will help you guys not have to do this twice. You know, I'm also kind of interested in whether or not phosphoric acid needs to be neutralized like with baking soda. So let's put some of this in there and see what happens. Yeah, a little bit. That's interesting. I'm making a mess here. All right, so we're gonna flush this tank out with some hot soapy water, and then we're gonna actually put this part B from this Kreem kit in here. You know, we got to basically pour this in, agitate the whole thing, drain what's left of this out of the tank back into this original container using a funnel or something. It needs to be nice and dry, and you really can't use air to dry these out because they will flash rust. And then we're immediately ready to put the actual Kreem tank liner in. So, but intermediately, we actually have to run over to Chips and have him solder the last hole on here. So let's see if this last step works. All right, we're all done cleaning out the acetone that we put into the tank. See if we can see how clean this is or isn't. That's not bad. Actually, wow, we did quite good. I'm really happy with that, actually. That looks like a good clean surface. All right, we're gonna head over to Chip's, get this thing soldered up real quick, and then we'll put our tank liner in there and we'll be done. All right, so we think there's still some extra acetone in here, so we're gonna try to put some air to it, blow it out, burn it off, and we'll see what happens here. Chip did a great job on. It was tough because there was a fairly good sized hole here. It was almost too large. Hard time getting the solder to even stick to it. But we ended up also having some residual silver that was hanging out in the tank. We got all that out. So what we'll do is cap the surface off with a plastic bag, put it in the tank liner, and then once I've done swirling all that stuff around in here, then what will be left will drain out of the tank liner, will drain out into a container. First thing I'm going to tell you is the most important part of this tank liner is you have to mix this up. I did not. I literally syringed probably 2 ounces, several milliliters in a syringe in order to squirt it into this gas tank. I had to get it into this tiny little hole. So that is not what this is supposed to look like. This is literally the material separating. Okay. I did not mix it, so when I put it in there, and literally all of this clear liquid stuff started draining. See, I've got it angled at this corner like right now. Down here is the low point. I did this in order to promote the draining of this clear liquid that came out of the solution of this stuff. So this is not what this is supposed to look like. What it's supposed to look like is this. And it's a very, very nice solid patch of liner, which is really nice to the touch. So the liner's primary purpose is to prevent rust. It's not to seal. They do say that it can seal little pinholes, but nonetheless, this stuff can actually seal the small pinholes. It says it right on the label for this stuff, and it's why a lot of people buy them. This is kind of disappointing. They say to use this with 2.5 gallons of water. They say this is good for 5-gallon tank. Okay, incompatibility. If this is good for 5, I need this good for 5. Okay. What happened is I diluted this severely in the sense that I used a couple ounces of this to test in a different tank, and I was putting the rest of this in the motorcycle tank. What ended up happening is this tank prep ended up being too diluted. So I left it in the tank longer. I literally left it overnight twice. I came back late, found that this tank still had some rust in it. Well, having done that, the phosphoric acid in this became neutralized. It weakened to the point where it was no longer acid. I think it was just water. I have to look at the chemical properties to understand exactly what happens when this dilutes. I think what happens is you have the natural reaction between the water and the acid and the rust, ultimately leaving simply water.
Breaking news.
Assuming that's correct. What happened is now it's just water and there's air, so there's rust. I think there was rust literally developing as I allowed it to sit. I know that rust requires oxygen in order to actually form. Question is, can it do it underwater in the absence of gaseous oxygen as opposed to the component of oxygen that is in water, H2O? So long story short, what happened is I put in part B, which is the conditioner, which is really acetone, I believe. Highly flammable, by the way. And after I put this in, rinsed the tank out, I set it down, and we prepared to take the tank over to Chip's so that he could solder it again, because I keep developing pinholes in this tank. Immediately after putting this in here and draining this out, I shook out as much as I could the tank immediately rusted. The entire internal surface is contaminated by rust again. Of which technically they say to not do that in the directions for this. They say remove all the rust and immediately put this tank liner in there, which I couldn't do because after pulling the acid out, I developed more leaks. So I didn't really want to put this on top of the rust. Even though it's suggested that oxygen is required for rust to form, could it still continue to rust underneath this layer of Kreem tank liner? I don't know. That question's not readily available. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to Walmart. I'm gonna get some white vinegar. I'm gonna get 3 gallons of white vinegar, and I'm just gonna stick it into this tank. And we're gonna see what happens. I'm gonna let it sit for a little while. I'm hoping that it won't develop any more pinholes. Then I'm gonna put some acetone in it, and then I am immediately gonna put this in. We picked up some good old Great Value Walmart brand vinegar. What's interesting about this stuff is that this is basically vinegar that's diluted to 5% acidity with water. I've never used this before either, and so we're literally just gonna dump this in and give it a few hours and see what happens. We're looking in here. Yeah, we got a little bit of a leak there. So we're gonna try to put on a piece of metal tape, seal up that little pinhole. We're gonna do the best we can to try to de-rust this tank, even with the pinhole that it's got. Looks like a tiny little pinhole right there. It's crazy how these are forming. This is just this metal tape. It's actually something I got from Home Depot. Nashua tape products. I just bought it for sealing together the ductwork on the heater in the shop. This stuff works great. It's the stickiest, most adhesive stuff I've ever seen, and it's really thin and it's really strong. So, and it's not breathable. It's almost like, literally almost like this chrome. Just tear off a small sheet and we'll stick it right over that hole. It's a bit of overkill, but it'll hold it for what we need for the time being. We got this thing filled to the brim. That appears to be doing very little. You can see right through the clear liquid to the bottom of the tank. There's a couple scratch marks. But otherwise doing nothing to that rust. Alright, well, this was an exercise in cheap Walmart vinegar. So I think we'll let that actually sit overnight, unfortunately. Alright, let's see if we can see any. Yeah, you can see that there's really not a lot happening. There's a little bit of stuff on the surface, but there's still some decent rust on the surface of this thing. I'll get a little scraper tool again and see if any of that scrapes off. Yeah, I may have to put, I think I'm gonna put some more muriatic acid in here. Chip gave me a gallon, and he said that the propane torch I have is enough to actually solder this. I do already know there's another hole in there, and the muriatic acid is probably going to create more. So I think what I will do is put muriatic acid in it and then wash it out, put some acetone through it, let that dry out, and then I will attempt to solder the holes that I find, and then I'll immediately put the tank liner in. I think I'm going to challenge myself to do that much. I'm going to try mixing the same strength level of muriatic acid as we did the phosphoric acid. Normally when we're doing muriatic acid, I'm doing like a gallon of it mixed with like 2 or 3 gallons of water in a, 15 to 20 gallon tank. This little tank is about 3 gallons, and we put a little less than 16 ounces of tank prep wash / cleaner A. So it says it makes concentrated 2.5 gallons. So what I think I'm going to do is take 16 ounces of muriatic acid in with 2.5 gallons actually of water. So maybe I'll do a couple extra ounces, or I'll adjust at least for the extra half a gallon that goes in this tank. It's a little over 3 gallon tank actually. So I'll do the math just to get some kind of indication what the muriatic acid does in relatively the same concentration. Now also, technically speaking, the muriatic acid has its own level of potency in its concentrated form, as does the phosphoric acid, which is the tank wash from Kreem. So let's see what this says on this muriatic acid that Chip gave us. says 31% hydrochloric acid. Each of these are not in their pure form in the store when you buy them. So we had 31%-ish strength in the muriatic acid. It is an unknown concentration of phosphoric acid that's in the Kreem tank wash. I'm guessing that they're probably pretty close. So, you know, so they suggested leaving that phosphoric acid in overnight mixed with 2.5 gallons of water. So I think I'm just gonna put that in there and see what happens. I think Chip may come over later today. Well, he doesn't know this yet, but I'm gonna ask him to come over. He's soldered this tank up like 3 or 4 times now, and I wanna actually do it myself. I wanna learn how to do it. So I'm just gonna try it, see what happens. I can do it with my own propane, small propane torch. This guy here, you know, typical, you turn the valve on and click the button and it ignites the flow from this small propane tank. So in theory, it should be hot enough. So let's just see what it does in the next 3 or 4 hours. I used 16 ounces, filled this up with muriatic acid, 31.45% hydrochloric acid that Chip gave us, and filled the rest of the tank with just tap water. Less than 5 minutes and we're already done. Look at that. That's literally almost clean. So we're not gonna mess around. All right, I guess I have a little bit of acetone left. It's kind of got a yellow tint to it. I need to be ready to solder it right away. Went to Home Depot, got a few items. I got a soldering kit, basically some solder and some flux. We've got some baking soda in order to neutralize the muriatic or hydrochloric acid. We got some more acetone so we can make the final clean in there and get before we put the tank liner in. And we got another bottle of propane. Got our Kreem tank liner. Yeah, that's ready to come out. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get that out of there, get it into a 5-gallon bucket. When you're dealing with muriatic acid, always use eye protection, and this kind, the goggles. Don't use plastic eyewear, eyeglasses. This stuff splashes around. You never know if you're gonna get it up underneath. Seal your face up. Get some good gloves to protect your skin. These ones from Harbor Freight I use all the time, but they also get little holes in them from snagging them on stuff. Muriatic acid will find its way through the little holes, so make sure you got brand new ones on every time you do this, because this stuff hurts when it gets on your skin. So, all right, so we just dumped out all the hydrochloric acid, the muriatic acid, water solution, and let's check out and see what the tank looks like. Looks good. Wow, look at that. Ready to rock. Curious if there's any holes in it. I think I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just rinse it out with water, and then we should be good to go in order to solder this up. Technically, the hydrochloric acid by nature is not flammable, but it does react with metals to create hydrogen gas, which is highly flammable. So we need to be extra careful doing this. I think in order to really safely do this, I do need to neutralize the tank. So I'm actually going to go ahead and put some water and some baking soda in the tank and neutralize what actually is in the tank for now. And then I'll feel more comfortable actually welding on this tank. So actually looks real good. So we're gonna blow some air through this and then put a torch on the other side just to make sure there's no actual gas in here that's flammable before we start welding. So, or before we start soldering. So let's give it a go.